not important. What is important is what I'm going to do. I just fucking hate this world and these human worms feasting on its carcass. My whole life is just cold, bitter hatred. And I always wanted to die violently. This is the time of vengeance, and no life is worth saving. And I will put in the grave as many as I can. It's time for me.
After a long-ass time of covering the first Midnight Club, I finally decided to revisit one of my childhood games, Midnight Club 2, the sequel that would take everything its predecessor did and improve upon it in every aspect. Midnight Club 2 is one of the arcade races that I fell in love with as a kid, alongside Burnout 2 and 3, Need for Speed Underground 1 to Carbon, and of course Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition. 2 was also a game that had a lot of frustration and difficulty sewed into its open-ended arcade experience. This month I played the game for the very first time since I was a kid, going back decades at this point. The feelings of this game were intense for a while, a lot of strong nostalgia from the 2000s style menu to the nightlit atmosphere that permeates throughout all three cities in this game. Midnight Club was a different cloth from the Need for Speed entries. It delved into street racing but in a very unique way that would stand out compared to the course-bound races in the other Need for Speed titles. You had an open world, the races were open, and you were never held back by barriers or walls or any of that shit. Even the first game had this rule going for it, and it did wonders for what was a launch title at the time. Midnight Club 2 was the superior sequel and felt like a far more realised version of 1. My overall opinion looking back on this game now is that it really is a masterpiece of arcade racing, and despite my bipolar phase of community posts that reflected my frustrations with Midnight Club 2, I realized that I still really enjoyed my time with it overall, and I still think that it's an amazing game. Nostalgia is a powerful double-edged sword. You want to revisit something, but when you do play it, you just don't have the same mindset anymore, and it's just not the same. It's a sad but inevitable course of life that we deal with, and no game is exempt from that reality. Even my absolute favorite games of all time nowadays face critiques from me, things I notice now that I didn't notice back then. Playing this game as an adult is very different from playing it as a kid. I realized this when I played the first Midnight Club, a game that was good for its time but now is very outdated and its driving model isn't very good at all. The second game though holds up far better, and I'm going to go into why. So let's dive into this painful but worthwhile experience, shall we? Like the first game, you're an underdog racer looking to prove yourself by climbing through the ranks, climbing your way to the top, except that you don't have a taxi cab to start with this time, but a shitbox that's somehow good enough to beat the first guy.
Look at this little shrimp. Where does he think he's kidding, posing like that? Think he can race me in that car? Still, I must try to be nice, yo. Hey, bro, follow me.
Moses, who is your first rival and is someone who ends up helping you throughout the career mode. Structurally, it's the same as 1. You find rivals, you beat them and get their car, and you repeat the process until you reach the champion of the city. You beat the champion, and then repeat the entire cycle in another city. This game just does it far better. The rivals feel much more fleshed out, they have distinct and unique personalities and appearances that give Midnight Club 2 a lot more personality overall. While the first game did also have this aspect, Midnight Club 2's high production values makes a much bigger difference here.
Above all things, cowardice is what I hate most. Determined strength will flow.
In the cutscenes you hear what they're thinking and what they actually say to you. Their presence is also tied with the choice of music in this game, adding another trait to them as people. And the way that music is applied in this game also reflects the city that you find yourself in. Los Angeles has hip-hop, Paris has house, and Tokyo has techno and trance. Midnight Club 2 has some of the most unique and varied city settings in any arcade racing game I've ever played. Each city is dynamically different in their layouts, their designs, their selection of cars, even down to the traffic that you see in the game. You see American-style cars in LA, European cars in Paris, and Japanese cars in Tokyo. It just makes sense. All three cities have their own identity and truly stand out in their own way. LA has large and open roads that makes it the easiest part of the career mode. Paris has lots of layers, very tight roads, and lots of traffic where car handling is more of a priority than speed. Paris is where things really start to heat up in terms of difficulty. And then Tokyo. Aesthetically, it's my favorite part of the game, but it is also a nightmare to navigate at times. It takes aspects of LA and Paris, a mix of larger roads and then tighter corners, alleyways, and expressways with dense traffic. The entire career experience starts from being somewhat easy to punishingly difficult and oftentimes frustrating. As much as I love Midnight Club 2, it is one of the hardest arcade races ever made, and there are reasons for why that is the case. Starting off with the open world. Midnight Club, Burnout, and Need for Speed for me have been the holy trinity of arcade racing games. But the one aspect that Midnight Club excels at the most, in my opinion, is the open world. You see, it's not just tied to leisurely cruising around the world, but it's also in the races. Every single race in this game gives you complete freedom to drive wherever you want in a race. As long as you hit the checkpoints, you can create your own routes. With good map knowledge and memorization, you can carve quicker shortcuts that lead to easier wins. Knowing the map is the key to success in the career mode, and at some point you are going to have to practice a bit. It feels like Rockstar really understood the freeform and unbound nature of street racing here, where the only rule here is to win. Where you go doesn't matter, you just win, that's all that matters. Not a lot of street racing games do this in the same way Midnight Club does, and the open-ended nature of this game's style of racing makes it a near infinite and dynamic racing experience that even the underground games can't hope to match. It can, however, also be very difficult, especially in Paris and Tokyo. It's easy to go off the beaten path and lose time. Going wherever you want can also lead to losing your position, making it harder to catch up. And when you follow a more convenient route, the same one as the other cars, you can also add a lot more pressure on yourself. It's hard enough with the uniquely frustrating traffic that this game has. In retrospect, the traffic and the wooden poles gave me a much harder time than any of the rivals in this game did. You will be restarting quite often because of this stuff, and it's a pill that you're gonna have to get used to swallowing. I've had devastating crashes, lost at the very last second, fell into the ocean, watched opponents use their NOS towards the finish line knowing that I had none left, got smacked around by both other drivers and traffic. There were times I wanted to put down the controller and just leave it at that, but I didn't want to, because I wanted to have some closure with this game, and I still wanted to have a good time. And besides, it's what Mr. Miyagi would have wanted. Starting from LA to the World Champion was a hell of a ride, and the final races in this game really do test your knowledge of the game's mechanics that they teach you, as well as your ability to navigate the maps. I enjoyed my time in LA, couldn't wait to get out of Paris, and suffered in Tokyo all the while enjoying its aesthetics. Seriously, Tokyo is such an amazing setting for racing games. It's so good that it made me forget that I even raged at it in the first place while being there. So how can I say that this is a masterpiece despite some of the things I've said about the open world and the game's challenges at times? Well, we've established a unique variety of rivals with their personalities and their appearances. Take those aspects and then tie them together with the amazing sense of racing and their mechanics. Sim races with a sim setup are amazing, but I would never play them on a controller. Games like The Crew or Forza Horizon are good, but they feel too realistic to match the variety of handling models that I look for in arcade racing games. Let me explain. When you look at the older Need for Speeds, the Burnout titles, and Midnight Club and other arcade races around that time, there were very clear and cut differences in their handling models and how they tackled the arcade racing experience. The Crew and Forza Horizon for me don't really feel that much different at all when you compare the two. Need for Speed nowadays still has that arcade feel, but I'm mixed on the quality of it overall with the more recent titles. Midnight Club 2 represents an era of arcade racing that I enjoyed so much more. Driving felt fun and wasn't trying to be super realistic. It was fun going at ludicrous speeds, jumping at insane heights to make for an epic landing. It made not just racing a blast, but also cruising around the streets as well. It's why I take more interest in indie racing games or older racing games in general, because they're varied in their gameplay and their physics and their driving models. The sense of speed and the intensity of races in Midnight Club 2 is incredible. Every clutch feels earned, and beating the rivals is always satisfying. The selection of cars is also fantastic, and while they're not licensed, they're pretty close to their real-life counterparts. It made me realize that I kind of miss racing games without licensed cars. Sometimes it's nice to just have cool and unique cars you wished existed. And not just cars, but also bikes that are stupid fast and have their own unique mechanics. Each car progresses the difficulty of the races over time. The faster that they are, the harder the races become. By the end, you'll have a lot less reaction time to avoiding traffic and ensuring that you make the right turns. And on bikes, it's even more unforgiving, because if you crash, you have to wait longer to recover. With the cars, you have your nitrous, which will become very important to save later on in career mode. You have Slipstream, which gives you a boost when behind a car long enough and your meter is full. It's sort of like infinite NOS when you think about it. Then you have the ability to weight transfer your car, doing 2 wheels. I didn't really use it that much, but it can be useful for very tight spaces, especially in Paris. With the bikes, you don't really have NOS, but you also don't need it because with wheelies, you can get a lot of speed very quickly. The weight transfer mechanic with bikes also gives you tighter turns, and bikes are much more mobile than cars. If you can use the bike properly, it becomes more or less easy mode. You have a variety of race types as well. You have the ordered races where you follow checkpoints in a sequence, then the unordered races where you have to find the right sequence to get to the finish line. They add a puzzle element that tests how fast of a route that you can make. Again, its open-ended nature of racing makes it one of the most dynamic racing experiences that you can have because every attempt is unique and you're never always taking the same path. Midnight Club 2 executes its gameplay much better than the first game and has aged a lot better overall. And to add more eye candy, there's even an RTX mod that gives a much nicer look overall. The game is just pure arcade racing, no bullshit whatsoever. You get a car or a bike, find an opponent and just race. While there is no customization beyond changing the color, the cars and the bikes already have nice designs, they're fun to drive and are pleasant to look at. Word of advice though, do not play this game on a keyboard, it is genuinely awful. When you finally finish the career mode, you can muck around in the arcade mode, which has its own set of race modes. Circuit races for each city, capture the flag and detonation for a more arcadey experience, you can rematch the rivals, and then finally you have cruise mode where you can just go wherever you want on the map. Re-racing the rivals also gives you an opportunity to practice racing them, and if you want an easier or significantly harder challenge, then use the how hard can it be cheat. 0 is the easiest and 9 is the hardest, and let me tell you, 9 is no joke at all. The cars don't really slow down anymore and use all of their speed, whereas the lower numbers make them much easier to manage. I'm not really sure why this is a cheat in the first place though. It felt like it should have just been an option to begin with in the settings to curate your own experience. Either way, you'll still have a challenging and fair experience in Midnight Club 2. It's just the type of racing game that you'll need to be patient with, because if you're not, you'll end up being more aggravated and more than likely just give up. For those trying it out the first time, just understand that it's a pretty old racing game, and if you've played Midnight Club 3 first, this is a much harder game by comparison and mistakes are more unforgiving. But if you can get past those difficulties that the game throws at you, you end up with one of the most satisfying and fun racing experiences that still exists today. It has a great career mode, great roster of vehicles and rivals, a goated soundtrack that is uniquely tied to each city, a variety of race types, a fantastic handling model, and let's not forget the most underrated feature of this game, the race editor. Basically, you have the option to create your own races, and if you're not the creative type, you can just have the game randomly generate a race for you on the fly. It is so good that it gives you an infinite pool of races to enjoy across the 3 cities. 3 cities that have their own unique challenges and designs that, despite my personal experiences with them, make up for an amazing game still. Unlike the first Midnight Club, I can actually see myself coming back to this game in the future and replaying the career mode, or just redoing the rival races in arcade mode. It still holds up really well in terms of gameplay, and while the graphics are showing their age more with each passing year, it's not as bad as the first one. If you want the best possible starting point into the Midnight Club franchise, this is the one I personally recommend that you start with, whereas the first game is only worth looking at for historical purposes. Sometimes it's not just nostalgia, sometimes it's always been a great game, even as the years pass in time. Thanks for watching.
Around them in proper fashion.